Do you believe in GPS? Because in Hemsby in 2026, believing in it means you're heading straight for a cliff. Imagine a town that once welcomed 12,000 visitors each day, now being deleted like a junk file. The sea does not invade. It quietly comes to collect its debt like a patient loan shark. The people here no longer stroll on the sandy beach to relax. They stand there calculating how many more meters of land they have before their lifelong homes collapse into the ocean. For England, this is perhaps no longer a distant forecast of climate change in 2050, but a harsh reality of 2026. A silent war is underway where the government faces a cruel choice: spend millions of pounds to protect the sinking lands, or quietly let nature reclaim these towns from the map forever. Why would a developed country like England accept its towns becoming ghosts in such a normal manner? We will decode the story of these forgotten lands right after this. If you open Google Maps right now, Hemsby is still there, a small dot on the east coast of England. There are roads, there is a beach, it has a clear name as if it has existed for 1,000 years, and indeed it has existed for nearly that long. Hemsby has been mentioned since the Viking era. Appeared in the Domesday Book in 1086, a coastal community living off the sea with bustling summers and tranquil winters. By the 20th century, this place exploded into a resort destination. In 1971, the Pontins Resort opened with over 500 chalets. Local residents say that on hot days, the beach could welcome around 12,000 people each day. That used to be a familiar piece of post-war England. Family. Summer vacation. Sea and sand. A stable form that many people in our generation once believed would last forever. But in the past 50 years, Hemsby has lost more than 70 meters of coastline. 70 meters doesn't sound like much, until you imagine that length equivalent to placing Olympic swimming pools end to end in front of your house. The problem is not just in Hemsby. Just to the north is Holderness, often described as one of the fastest eroding coastlines in Europe. Many historical settlements have completely disappeared, not due to war, not due to bankruptcy, only due to water and time. There is a list called Lost Settlements. Reading through it feels like reading a geographical obituary. The name is still in the records, but the land is no longer there. What makes this story worth pondering is not the change, but the speed of it compared to how we manage it. The digital map updates according to administrative data, but the coastline doesn't wait for budget approval. Perhaps this touches on a deeper concern of a generation that witnessed the longest period of prosperity in the 20th century. We grew up in a world where highways expanded, cities developed, and property values increased. The direction is to move forward. Here the direction is to step back. And the strange thing is, it doesn't make a loud noise. There is no announcement that this town has expired. It's just that every storm season, a piece of land disappears. What do you think? If our homeland starts to recede by meters each year, would you consider it a normal, natural occurrence, or a warning about how we are preparing for the future? Please leave your opinion below. I really want to hear the perspectives of those who have lived long enough to see the world change many times. And if you find these candid, unpretentious conversations worth continuing, consider subscribing to the channel. Because in the next part, we will leave the map and step into the house of a man who has been told he has exactly 2 hours to pack up his entire life. At that moment, the story is no longer about geography. It became a story about ownership and survival. In the previous section, we talked about the map. Now let's step into the living room of a real person. In Hemsby, there are families who have been told they have about 2 hours to leave their homes. Not 2 months, not 2 weeks, 2 hours, because the ground ahead is no longer stable enough to wait any longer. Think about it for a moment. You spend 30 years working, pay off the mortgage, repair the roof, replace the windows, planting trees in the yard. And then one afternoon, someone knocked on the door and said that the structure underneath was no longer safe. It's best to move out immediately. The house still stands there, but its future is not. There was a resident in the Marams area who had lived there for over a decade who once said that when you move in front of the house is a sand dune nearly as high as the roof. You couldn't even see the sea. Now he has a 180-degree view of the ocean. Not because the house is higher, but because the sand has disappeared. The road in front of the residential area has a section that has collapsed. Water pipes and electrical wires are exposed above ground. Things that were originally designed to lie stable in the ground have now become fragile. This touches on a deep-seated concern for many people. We are taught that home ownership is the foundation of security. That when you finish paying off the loan, you are truly standing firm. But here, the lesson seems different. The house can be paid off, but the land foundation does not have a fixed contract. It seems the financial system allows you to fix the interest rate for 30 years. Nature does not. Many people in Hemsby say they are not afraid of the end. They fear the feeling of waking up each morning and wondering if there will still be enough land in front of their house today. Prolonged instability creates a kind of silent pressure. Not panic, it's insomnia. When a house becomes temporary property, what is truly lost? Is it the market value, or is it the belief that the future can be calculated? We often talk about national security, but for many people, security is simply the foundation beneath their feet. When that is called into question, everything else follows. Maybe this is just the reality of coastal communities. Maybe it was a known risk. But ask yourself one thing: if you received a notification that you have 2 hours to pack up your entire life, what would you take with you? Photo album medal, or the toolbox that has been with you for decades? And a bit deeper, if the land can no longer ensure sustainability, is the concept of ownership changing without us realizing it? In the next part, we will leave the living room and step into a spreadsheet. Because behind those houses is a very cold calculation. And in that calculation, there is a figure worth considering. £100 million each year. And almost nothing has been built to protect the coastline. Now we leave the seaside house and step into something even colder than the sea waves. Budget spreadsheet. Hemsby has around 3,000 permanent residents, a small number when placed in the context of the national budget. But in the summer, this town welcomes tens of thousands of tourists. According to local estimates, the area generates between £88 to £100 million each year from tourism. That doesn't sound small at all. £100 million, many dinners, many hotel rooms, many small businesses depend on that beach. So the natural question is, if the economic value is so high, why not build a protective line? There has been a proposal, a project about 1.3 kilometers long, estimated at £15 million. After inflation, it could rise to nearly 20 million. This figure is not far-fetched in the context of public spending, but the project does not qualify for funding from the central government. Why? Because the funding system for erosion prevention in England operates based on a cost-benefit ratio. If the value of the asset being protected does not exceed a certain threshold compared to the investment cost, the project will not be prioritized. Here, what is being calculated is the value of fixed real estate, not the flow of travel money, not family memories, not community stability. A town can generate tens of millions each year, but if the defensible asset value is not large enough on paper, the system will say no. Money from tourism is recorded regularly, but when it comes to spending money to protect that revenue, the calculations become cautious. Just think about it. If a town brings in £100 million a year but only has 3,000 permanent residents, what is it in the eyes of a spreadsheet, a strategic asset, or an acceptable risk? But that raises a difficult question to answer. Because if the calculation says that a small community is not worth long-term investment, is that a practical decision or a sign of a new prioritization model? I don't have a definitive answer. Maybe in the context of a limited budget, it is not possible to save everyone. But when numbers start to replace people in the equation, trust can be affected. What do you think? If you were the one deciding the budget, would you rely on pure formulas, or would you also consider community and historical factors? And if the revenue from one place is large enough but the population is small, what should be prioritized? If you find these straightforward and unflinching analyses useful, consider subscribing to the channel. Not to agree with me, but to continue together peeling back the layers beneath the issue. Because in the next part, we will look at something even more complicated than money. Ownership. private land, and how a community can be left behind, completely legally. At this point, the story is no longer just about waves and money, it has become a story about paperwork. And sometimes the paperwork is even colder than the sea. In the Marhams area of Hemsby, many houses are built with wooden frames placed on stilts without concrete foundations according to standard building practices. The residents have lived there for decades. They pay taxes, they renovate, they consider it a home. But in the administrative records, some units are not classified as standard housing. It sounds technical, but the consequences are not technical at all. When erosion occurs, the question immediately arises, who is responsible? And here everything starts to break down. The road leading into the residential area is on private land. A part of the sandy area and the foot of the sand dunes is related to the Crown Estate. The local authorities manage another part. When land is divided into many ownership pieces, responsibility is also divided accordingly. And when responsibility is divided, actions often slow down. I'm not saying anyone is deliberately turning their back, but the system operates within legal boundaries. If a road section is on private land, the authorities might say it doesn't fully fall under their jurisdiction. If a house does not meet the fixed construction standards, it may not qualify for certain types of assistance. All of it has a reason. Everything has a legal basis. And this is the point that makes many people feel helpless. You can live in a place for 20 years, but when the crisis hits, you find yourself standing in a gap between the terms. There is an irony here that I think you will understand. When collecting taxes, the boundaries are very clear. When it comes to saving a piece of land, the boundaries become surprisingly complex. The problem is not just in Hemsby. It reflects a broader structure. Private ownership is the foundation of a market economy. But when nature changes faster than the law, those boundaries can turn into barriers. If this situation occurs in a major financial district or a densely populated urban center, would the handling be different? Maybe yes, but the question worth asking is, what criteria determine where strong protection is provided and where is considered risk acceptance? What do you think? If you live on privately owned land, the access road belongs to another owner and the beach in front is related to yet another entity. Do you really feel protected, or are you standing amidst the fine print in a contract you have never fully read? We all understand that the legal system exists to create order, but when that order makes a community feel left behind, even if it is completely legal, perhaps it is time for us to reconsider how we allocate responsibility. If you find these perspectives worth delving deeper into, please subscribe to the channel so we can revisit this topic in the future. Because in the next part, we will look at another country that also lives by the sea, also faces similar dangers, but has chosen a very different path. And that comparison might make you think more than you realize. Standing on Hemsby Beach on a windy day, you look straight out at the North Sea. On the other side is the Netherlands. The geographical distance is not far, but the way the two countries face the sea is very different. The Netherlands is a country where most of its territory is below sea level. To put it bluntly, if they miscalculate, they won't just lose a town. They could lose a part of the country. So, for many decades, they have built a large-scale sea defense system. The Afsluitdijk, approximately 32 kilometers long, is just one prominent example. They even have a long-term program called the Delta Program, designed to protect the land for decades to come. There is a saying often mentioned when talking about the Netherlands: they don't build dikes to protect every single house. They build dikes to protect the survival of the nation. That is a strategic way of thinking. Not reacting to the storm season, but preparing in advance for what might happen. And what about England? You also know the sea is advancing. You have the data, there are experts, there is a report. But the approach seems to be different. He has a coastline longer than 12,000 kilometers, many coastal towns, many small communities. In a system with a limited budget, protecting everywhere is almost impossible. Therefore, instead of protecting the entire line, England adopts a prioritized approach. Where there is a high population density, where there is important infrastructure, where the benefit-to-cost ratio is clearly favorable, Other places may fall under the category of long-term risk management. Simply put, not every place can be saved. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong, I'm just saying it's a choice. And every choice reflects the values that a nation places on its map. He was once a maritime power building an empire on the oceans. Now the ocean is challenging its own shores. History has its own way of creating interesting loops. But we also have to be fair. The Netherlands invested heavily because they had almost no other choice. You might think that they have more space to adapt, more inland areas to resettle. Many budget priorities must be considered simultaneously. So, the question is not who is right. The question is which way will you choose? If you were a policymaker, would you allocate resources to protect a town of 3,000 residents? Or will you focus on areas with a greater economic impact? Will you build a seawall, dozens of kilometers long, or accept that some places will have to retreat in a controlled manner? And a bit deeper, can a nation accept the gradual loss of small towns while still maintaining its sense of integrity? If you find this comparison helps you see the issue more clearly, please subscribe to the channel so we can continue dissecting such difficult choices. Because in the final part, we will return to Hemsby and pose a bigger question: if this is a precedent, who will be the next to be marked on the shrinking map? When leaving Hemsby, what occupied my thoughts was not the houses that had been demolished, but rather the feeling that this story could repeat itself elsewhere. Not loud, no grand announcements. It's just that each name gradually disappears from reality even though it remains on the map for a while. In the history of England, many coastal communities have disappeared in a similar manner. Some names now only remain on the list of lost settlements. They once had churches, pubs, and schools. Now they are footnotes in documents. That doesn't happen in a year. It happened over many decades. And then one day, people realized that there were no longer any residents there. Hemsby could become another name on that list. Maybe not today, maybe not next year, but the precedent has been set. If a small town does not qualify for long-term protection due to budget formulas and legal structures, then places with similar characteristics may face the same decision. We are entering a phase where the term managed retreat is being mentioned more frequently. Managed retreat. Sounds reasonable. There is a plan, there is control, but essentially it is still a retreat. Not every community gets to keep its old position. And when retreat becomes a normal policy choice, the question is no longer whether a town will be affected. The question is, what criteria determine who gets to stay and who has to move? Population asset value. Strategic infrastructure. Number of votes. Or is it simply cheaper to make it disappear? We are probably all looking at it as a problem that many coastal countries are having to solve. Erosion and rising sea levels are not just a story for England. It is a global trend, but the way each country responds reflects what they value. Perhaps Hemsby is just a small case in the bigger picture, but many changes in history start from small places like that. When a precedent is accepted, it gradually becomes the norm. So I ask you, if a town can be put on the at-risk list without causing a national uproar, does that change the way you view the stability of other places? If today it's Hemsby, which town could it be tomorrow? And a bit deeper, can a country accept the gradual loss of small communities while still maintaining a sense of overall cohesion, or at some point the scattered losses will form a bigger picture? Perhaps there is no truly certain answer, but I believe this is a conversation worth continuing. If you find that calm and realistic analyses like this help you see more clearly what is happening, please subscribe to the channel so we can continue to delve deeper together. Because in the conclusion, we will return to the most fundamental question of this entire journey: when a developed nation accepts to shrink its map, is it a long-term strategy, or a sign of a larger change quietly taking place? When looking back at the entire story, I realize that the most thought-provoking thing is not the lost meters of land, but rather how we react when they are lost. No noisy crisis, no historic statements, only administrative decisions, budget formulas, meeting minutes, and then a retreating coastline. Hemsby may not have disappeared yet, but its position in the minds of many has changed. From a peaceful resort town, it has become an example, a precedent, a test of how a nation defines what is worth preserving. If you were the one deciding the budget, would you save a small town with centuries of history but a small population, or focus on the larger centers? If your hometown starts losing land year by year, will you stay for the memories or leave for the reality? If you find this video offers a calm, non-noisy perspective that is deep enough to ponder, please hit like so that more people can also access this topic. Please share if you think this is a discussion worth spreading. And subscribe to the channel if you want to continue analyzing stories that intersect economics policy and real life with me. We do not seek drama, we seek clarity. This video is analytical and commentary-based, drawing on public information sources, mainstream media, and research documents. Some figures may change over time or according to different measurement methods. The content is not intended to criticize or hold any specific individual or organization accountable, but rather to discuss phenomena and policies at the systemic level.